I'm Tom Sabella.
And I'm Bob Bender, and we're the co-producers of The Business Side of Music. Today we're here to talk about, well, let's face it, the business side of the music biz.
Business side of music biz.
Yeah.
So you're a businessman as well as a musician?
Well, that's probably one of the biggest problems out there is the artists out there in the world aren't necessarily business minded. They're creatives, and that's really kind of been their focus. And I think our job here today is to help educate them just a little bit about what the music business involves.
Well, they have to study it a little bit. You're going to have to study the business a little bit. Not as much as maybe you would practice your guitar or your instrument, but you need to study a little bit so you don't get taken. We know a lot of musicians that had a bad accountant. Maybe they used a relative that was an accountant and they took them for a lot of money. I know that Billy Joel's brother-in-law, he used him as accountant and he took him for only $90 million.
Wow, $90 million.
Just $90 million. And there's many people that have gotten caught up by using the wrong people. So you need to learn a little bit about accounting as part of the business. So that's one step.
And also good legal representation.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of artists getting into the business don't really understand in the beginning that you need to be able to protect yourself. It's not always just protecting others, but protecting yourself too. So having, you said, good accounting advice also goes in hand with good legal advice.
And a legal advice who is someone who is a music attorney, not your mother's
somebody that handles estate or real estate or probate.
Attorney,
yeah, exactly.
Somebody or your brother who has studied real estate that thinks he's a lawyer. You need to find the right people. So that's the kind of things that we're talking about when you get into business. Find the right people and build that team. Have those people around you so you don't have to do it all the time.
And we're going to talk about building business relationships within the industry, but how do you find a good entertainment lawyer? How do you find a good accountant that works in that business?
Whoa. How do we answer that one?
Well, I think to me, it would be you're asking questions. You've got to reach out and find other people in the business, get their references, check them out, seek out referrals on who, we're lucky because here in Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah, that was the first thing that came to my mind. We have a lot of opportunity here in Nashville, but if I lived in Wheeling, West Virginia, what attorney would I go to? But I think I would first go to the internet, and Google is my friend. I would start looking for references and trying to find the right people and ask questions. But definitely don't take the first one that you pick. Do some research, take some time, get some references, call these people and get a vibe. Talk to them on the phone. Get a sense of who they are and what they are and who they've worked with. Call those people and find out what kind of response they get from the people that they've employed.
Boy, and that is some great information right there, is doing your research to find the right people. I worked with an entertainment law firm out of Los Angeles for many years, but my attorney of record was actually out of Ireland. We just happened to Skype or email, but because he was licensed to work in the state, he was able to help me navigate those waters that we talked about. It can be full of sharks and prevent some perils and pitfalls. And that's the other thing. Jumping back a step is working with the right people, not just the accountants and the attorneys, but finding the right people to work with. And we get back to, once again, this is a business.
Yes.
You're talking about working in the entertainment industry, but we've got to remember that when you associate yourself with certain folks, it is a reflection on you.
That's right.
And ultimately, and you said it, especially with Google these days, or Bing, or whatever that search engine is, it can be your best friend or your worst enemy. So it's important that you associate with the right people. And that gets us into building relationships.
Yes. And that's leading into that, when you looking for a lawyer or an accountant, you got to realize that the record labels that you're going to deal with, they've got lawyers and accountants, and they have all these people lined up. So you need to have the right people. So when you're negotiating with them, you have already built the relationships with the people that are strong and on your team. So when you go there, again, you're not going to get taken.
You brought up another valid point. When I worked at the record labels, we had more accountants and more attorneys on payroll than we did radio promotions people, sales people, A&R people. And there's a reason for that, because those folks are online to protect the record label's assets. So who's going to protect your assets?
Yeah.
So it's finding those relationships of people that'll work with you.
Something I learned, no one cares about your business more than you do. So you've got to pay attention to your business because nobody else does. So you've got to watch that bottom line. Just for those accountants, all those people from the record industry, they're watching the bottom line for that record industry. So you need people watching your bottom line too, because you need to make a living. That's why you're there.
And part of building relationships, wouldn't you think, involves networking? And once again, you said Wheeling, West Virginia may not be a deep pool to network in, but once again, we have online, we have social marketing, we have these platforms. You can start doing some networking that way.
Yeah, and you find out with the internet, you have the world at your hands. You don't just have the little area that you live in of whatever town. You have the whole world at your hands. So when you're building relationships, you have it at your disposal. So look at it. Now, something I learned, and that's why I moved to Nashville. I lived in a little town, and I thought, I could make it in the music business. But unless you're in the music business where it's happening, and a fella told me this, he said, if you want to make it, you need to be in New York, L.A., or Nashville. And that's where the music business is happening, because to build those relationships, when someone calls and say, hey, I want to talk about this, you can meet at Starbucks in 15 minutes. But if I lived in Hubbard, Ohio, I couldn't get to Nashville until the next day. That's difficult to make that negotiation and move around. So if you're there and make yourself available, you can build those relationships.
What if you're not? What if you are stuck in, let's say, Des Moines, Iowa, or Albuquerque, New Mexico? How do you do that? Is it something that can be accomplished online?
Yes, I think so. And we have a good friend that we've interviewed on the show, and they come to Nashville at least once a month, and they're here. So they do. They've made it a point to be here, and they make a presence. So I didn't know they didn't live here until they told me. So they made a very good presence. So it can be done. Gets a little more expensive. Of course, it's expensive to move here too. So,
Yeah.
But yes, you can, as long as you make it a good effort to be and get your face known and seen. The other thing about building relationships is when you get to these towns, don't be pushy and don't ask for something. Don't always ask. Just learn, listen, sit back, and these people, they'll share with you the things that are happening, but don't be too pushy and ask too hard.
We have a mutual friend that we have worked with in the past on our show, the Business Side of Music podcast, who always said to us, don't ask people what they can do for you, but you ask people what you can do for them. Mm-hmm. And that goes a long way. And it doesn't really matter in which town.
No, that's it. And that's how the doors got open for me. I met a great guy here in Nashville, and he took me under his wing. And one day I just had the nerve to ask him. I said, I'm a nobody from Hubbard, Ohio. What was the click? He said, you didn't ask me for anything. He said, you wanted to learn. I said, that's it. And the doors have opened up amazingly. So that's the key to my success here, is just knocking on doors, being friendly with people, and taking them to lunch, asking them. But don't waste their time either, too. That's another thing. Let's go have a cup of coffee. Their time is much more valuable than a cup of coffee. So
and
think about it.
We've had that conversation with some folks that a gentleman that throws a dinner every few months for people within the industry to be able to network, because he said personally it got to the point where he was going out to have coffee with everybody every day. He says, I wasn't getting any work done. So yeah, really respect other people's time, because it is, and your time is valuable too.
Yeah. It's much more valuable than what you really think about spending time over a cup of coffee. So think about that too. Their time is valuable, and they realize that.
So you're in the music industry. You've started to make some connections. I think it gets back to, once again, doing your research and figuring out what works and what doesn't work. Maybe one of the things also, and maybe you're a performer in a symphony orchestra. Maybe you're the the first chair violinist, or you're in the brass section. Having contracts protects you when you're getting in there and performing in these situations. You know, if you're in a rock and roll band and you're playing in a club, a lot of times it's just a handshake. But if you're going to start going out and playing in bigger venues in front of larger people, you got to have a contract. Should that person who's maybe not in a rock and roll band but is maybe a singer or a performer or an instrumentalist in a symphony orchestra or in, let's say, a concert band, should they also be making sure they have a contract that they're protected?
Absolutely. Yeah, you got to have somebody on your side, your attorney on your side, that can look at that contract, because you don't know what what they have going on that could be cheating you. And you could say you're going to get paid, and they'll walk away. They'll be running away from you, and you won't get paid. You'll never find them again. So yes, absolutely, you need to have somebody watching your back for you.
And this is a tough business. We talk about that a lot, and watching out for the bottom feeders and the sharks.
It's bad.
And we have to make sure that in order to take care of ourselves, we have to make sure that we have the right paperwork in front of us. The artist or the performer should have that right paperwork. So once again, it gets back to that attorney.
Yep.
And then it's also, I think, defining what your worth is. What is your value when you do these things? And I believe that a lot of the creative people out there don't really have a good sense of what their value is.
Right. My thought is never pay to play. These venues where they get you to sell tickets so you can play at their venue, and never pay to play. If you want to play, my lowest number is free. I'll come out and play a couple numbers for you for free, but never pay to play, because again, like you said, your time, your talent is valuable. So don't play for pay, or don't pay to play. I'm sorry. Get out there and make yourself valuable and let people know that you're worth something. So that's important.
And there's a big difference between an audition to get a gig than it is to, as you said, pay to play.
Yep.
And that's a big thing in Los Angeles, in Hollywood, and a lot of the rock clubs there. They will encourage you or make you pay to play. It's something you should never do. I agree. So getting to that sense of value, you have to do your research once again. Find out what other artists in similar situations, what they're getting per gig, what they're getting per night, what they're getting per hour, because that's a good benchmark for you to start at. But don't expect high dollars, big money in the very beginning when you're first getting in. It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. One other thing that comes to my mind too that I wrote in my book was setting goals. If I could talk a little bit about that too.
Absolutely.
That's very important to hit a target. If you don't have a goal and if you haven't written it down, you're not going to hit that target. So you need to take some time and figure out what your goals are. And briefly, what I believe is you take 3 steps. You have a long-term, mid-term, and short-term goals. And you write those down. And then you try to accomplish those goals. And as you move up the ladder of those goals, they can change, but as long as you can see those goals, you can hit them. And it worked for me. I wrote 3 goals down: medium, or small, medium, and large. Put them on the mirror where I got up every morning, and I looked at it every morning when I was shaving. And I thought about it. I need to get in the music business. I need to get in the music business. And that first goal I reached.
And that was your short-term goal.
That was my short-term goal.
Yeah.
Then I went into my medium goal. That was moving to Nashville. Then I moved into the long-term goal, and it's all been uphill since then. But I had that goal. I could see it every day, and it was in front of me. So that's the short version of it. But you can do that and write the goals down on just a simple piece of paper, or put it on the dash of your car where you're driving every day, and write them down. And it works. Whatever that magic is there, it works.
I agree. You have to have goals. You have to know what it is you want. When I first started in this business, it was exactly that. I said, I want to be able to accomplish these things. And my fault was, when I had finished accomplishing those, I had not set other goals. So then I had to start thinking, okay, what's the next thing I want to do? And so when you set those long-term goals, how long is a short-term goal? Let's talk about that.
Okay.
How much time frame? Okay, I've got a short-term goal. How long do I take to achieve that? Is that 3 months or a year or?
I looked at it as 3 months to a year.
Okay.
And then from a year to 2 years, and then from 2 to 5 years in the
Okay.
long term. So that's where I gauged it. But that was me personally.
Yeah.
Okay, you can make it whatever you want as your goal. And again, it can change. And maybe that goal that you had as a short-term goal, you didn't reach it or was the wrong one, change it. If it's something, the door opened up somewhere else that you like doing, write something else down and let it move on to the next door that opens up. So it's up to you, but as long as you have it in front of you and you can see that door will open up.
I love that attitude because the goals that you write down may change. It's especially this year, 2020.
Oh.
It's been such a fluid
Change?
environment.
It hasn't changed a bit, has it?
And we do run into a situation where, well, I started the beginning of the year thinking I was going to go on tour and perform a lot of gigs and do a lot of things. And boy, that changed for everybody.
Yep.
And so you almost have to reinvent the wheel. So those short-term goals that you set for yourself may have to change, but your 1 to 2 year goals, and as you said, it doesn't have to be 1 to 2 years. It might, maybe your first goal is everything you can accomplish in a year, and then your mid-range goals are a year to 3 years, but then your long-term goals. And once again, because we're in an industry that is constantly evolving and constantly changing, don't be afraid to change yourself.
Yeah, don't be afraid. And our industry doesn't really know where it's going.
No.
So that it's going to change, and try to follow what they're doing might drive you crazy. But keep your ear down, listen to what's going on, read about it, and pay attention to which direction. But they really don't know. We don't really know what's going on. We know Nashville downtown Broadway is shut down. The musicians are, they don't know where they're going. So right now we're in an area where it's difficult, but we do see musicians finding ways to make money. Things online, having home concerts, having different things to make money of them, without going out and getting into bars and places where they're not allowed to play anymore.
I think something we've talked about on the podcast is, making money during this very tough time, during this transition in our world. And you're right, we used to call them living room concerts. You'd go to somebody's house and they'd invite 10 friends and you'd put on a little acoustic performance. Well, you can't do that now. So, doing the online concert with the tip jar or the donation box, that always comes in so important. You can't forget those things because, once again, let's get back to it. You're here to make money. It's a very creative process, but you're here to make money. And doing that doesn't limit you. You can pretty much do anything and everything. And that gets us to the next thing. You're doing these events. Now's the time to start building your database. And you and I personally know what it takes to build that database because those are your fans.
Yep.
And those are the people that like you enough to maybe get online and watch a show. What does it take to build that database?
Work.
Yeah.
Hours.
Yeah.
And building that database too. One other way to make money, it just come to thought: sell merchandise.
Yes.
On your website, wherever at, sell the merch. People will buy it. Okay, and merch is not only just your CDs or your music. Physical CDs, people like to have those because they get your autograph. That's a good way to make a little extra money. So merchandise, building a database, you got to start somewhere. Okay, so get some names.
Get that first email address.
Email address. The email is so important, and a newsletter is so important because it's a one-on-one experience with people that when you send it to them, they're going to read it. It's not a hit and miss like you do on social media. So I started out with 100 people that were just my friends on my newsletter, and it just kept growing. But what we do now is on our Facebook, and don't kill me when I say, or not on Facebook, but on our newsletter, don't kill me when I say this because I'm not so sure I even like it when they pop up in front of you and say, sign this so you get a free, and we give away a free book.
Right.
That comes up, but it works. Okay, so that pop up and you ask them for their email address. Sure, you know what we're doing. We want your email address so we can send you something. That automatically goes into a database where we have your name and we can send out and build our mailing list and send you newsletters and tell you what we're doing. But right away, that helps us build the relationship with those people, and they go to our podcast and listen to our podcast. So that's one way to build a database that we use, and it works very successfully.
When you build your database, it's not just the email address. You probably want to know maybe what city and country they're in too.
Yes.
So you have a good idea of what your demographics are.
Yes. Well, you can probably explain to the audience where our demographics are with our podcast, and that's just because we work it, and we work our social media, and we work the demographics that we have that we can follow because of the algorithms that we use with the company that we work with.
You brought up a good example of, or I should say, you brought up a good topic in that. The example I would use is when we first started doing the Business Side of Music podcast, our audience was basically the United States, and it wasn't all 50 states. We could see where we had what we called hot markets and where they weren't. And now we're in 60 plus countries around the world. Now, that part of it wasn't a lot of hard work for us. It was really organically grown on its own. Where we've had to work is to build that database of email addresses, names, email addresses, sometimes phone numbers if they're willing. And the reason I say phone numbers is because you can always text them something. We have a buddy here in town that's how he announces his upcoming gigs. He sends out a text blast to everybody. Sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. But name, email address, city, and country, because then you have an idea of where your audience is. And we've discovered just on our show, some of our strongest markets, India is our number 2 market.
Who listens in India?
Yeah.
I laugh at it. What do we have to say that people in India? I even saw that we have a listener in Iraq. People listen to Iraq, and I'm going, okay.
Or Russian Federation.
Russian, yeah. So there's where we're building an audience. We're building a database where people know where we're at. So that's an exciting part of the music business that we're a part of.
Let's talk about email addresses from the other end of things. And you and I did a trade show last year before everything came crashing down. A lot of people would approach us, and I'm actually even going to take a step further out. And I did a conference a couple months ago up in Toronto, Canada. It was, of course, all done by Zoom, and got to speak to several great artists and managers and people that work in the business. Hey, first thing, before we get going, send me your contact information. And they would send me their Instagram or their TikTok or their Twitter feed or their Facebook. That's not your contact information.
No.
And so you need those email addresses. So the best way to do that, especially when we get back into the real world of, what we call grip and grins at trade shows and events, is the business card. Yeah.
Yeah, that was... When we did that show, we had a little fishbowl. Is that, I guess, what we'd call it?
We were giving away things.
And some very expensive things. There were microphones and
headphones,
and a one-of-a-kind book that was all full color. And people would come up and we'd ask them for your business card, and they'd go, I just gave out my last one. No, you didn't. You never had one. And that's, so they missed out on something for free. And the contact information, I don't even know how to explain it. I guess I'm lost for words at this point. Why wouldn't you have a business card? I think you can get business cards for 500 cards for under $10.
And that's the thing. Well, I'm afraid to give my email address out. I'm going to
I've
get
heard that
spam.
Too. What?
Okay. Well, first of all, we're not spam. You're not spam as that creative artist. And if you have a newsletter, which we've talked about briefly, they can always unsubscribe to it.
Yep.
Make sure that you have a link there to have them unsubscribe. Now, by saying that, when they unsubscribe, don't delete their email address.
Right.
Keep it.
Yep.
That may come in handy down the road, because you could always send out an email later on and go, hey, I know that you're not receiving my newsletter, but did you know I have a new album coming out?
Yep. And there are companies out there, and the one we work with, they let you know if you're spamming them. They watch it, so we're not going to spam you. So you already know that we're not spamming you.
Yeah. So it's keeping email addresses when you get them, but it's that business card that you can hand out to people, and the business card should have your email address on it.
Yes, and make sure you have your name on there. I've seen places where people don't have their name, and it's that physical touch that they have that card. You have it. You put it in your wallet or you keep it and you have it, it's on your desk and people know, you just got to have a business card.
Yeah.
I was so fired up after that NAMM convention. I went home and wrote an article on it and put it out there. I just thought, you got to have a business card, folks. So if I can simply say it, if you don't have a business card, why not?
And I want to clarify. Tom said the NAMM convention, not something else. The NAMM show. You're
the
at
show, yeah, the
yeah
NAMM
you're
show.
at the NAMM show, which is the National Association of Music Merchants, and anybody and everybody that is selling music equipment is there, and they're selling their wares, they're selling their services. Why would you be afraid to give anybody a business card with your name, your phone number, and your email address? Because you never know, you may be able to strike some kind of a endorsement deal from them sometime.
Yeah, and these are major companies, Gibson. They're not gonna sell your name to somebody you don't want to, or
No.
Shure, all these big companies. Just get a business card.
And that is so important. And building relationships and understanding the music business.
And setting goals.
Yep.
We did it.
Yeah. This is Bob Bender,
This is Tom Sabella.
and thank you for listening to us today.
Thank you.